The sun split the dry sky like a blade, casting long, jagged shadows across the wide-open plains. Dust curled behind a lone rider, his silhouette hard and angular against the burning blue. Jedediah McGray, cattle baron of Bent Willow, wasn't a man prone to sentiment or second thoughts. He'd built his fortune with calloused hands, grit in his teeth, and a rifle always within reach. But as he rode toward the depot, something uneasy twisted in his gut. He was meeting his bride. A month earlier, he'd agreed to marry a woman he'd never met, only seen her name on a letter in her uncle's shaky handwriting, Eleanor Albright, the niece of a down-on-his-luck rancher from East Texas. The deal was clean. In exchange for marrying her, Jed would acquire grazing rights on a fertile stretch of river-fed land. The rancher had no sons, Jed had no wife. Arranged marriages weren't unheard of out here, especially not for men like him, scarred, lonesome, and aging faster than his bones should allow. The rumors about Eleanor hadn't helped his mood. "They say she's got a face like an old boot," his foreman, Ree, had muttered over whiskey one night, chuckling meanly. Heard a preacher choked on his own tongue the first time he saw her. Jed had grunted, unconvinced. "Don't need pretty. Need practical. Pretty doesn't put fire in a man's belly. Pretty don't cook or herd cattle." Now, as he dismounted at the dusty station, Jed rolled his shoulders, trying to shake off the strange sense that something was about to change. The train hissed and groaned to a halt, steam curling into the wind like ghost fingers. Passengers spilled out, merchants, miners, a woman with twin boys in tow. Then, at the end, she stepped down. Eleanor Albright. She wore a high-necked dress of dark green wool, worn at the sleeves. Her posture was ramrod straight. A wide-brimmed hat shielded her face, and a veil of sheer black lace fell just past her chin. He could see the faintest outline of a mouth, lips neither smiling nor frowning. She held a leather satchel in one hand and a small revolver holstered at her hip. That caught his attention. Jed took 2 steps forward. "Miss Albright." Her voice was smooth, deeper than expected, with a kind of calm that didn't come easy. "Mr. McGray. You travel light." "I've learned not to carry more than I can shoot my way out with," she said. He blinked. She added, "Shall we sign papers first or eat first? I've been on that train for 3 days and could murder a biscuit." He couldn't help the chuckle that slipped out. "Reckon we'll eat." They rode side by side in silence back to the ranch. The land around them was scorched dry, tall grass brown to brittle stems, the sky empty of clouds for weeks. Jed couldn't read much from the angle of her face beneath the veil, but her posture never wavered. She didn't flinch when the wind blew hard or when they passed a line of vultures picking at a dead calf. She rode better than some of his hands. He wanted to ask why the veil, but the words stuck in his throat. He was a man who prided himself on not needing to ask things. Still, curiosity itched at him like a thorn in his boot. Back at the ranch house, Ree and the others gave her sidelong looks, trying not to stare. She ignored them entirely. In the dining room, she pulled her gloves off with clean precision. Her hands were pale, fingers long, a scar shaped like a crescent moon along one knuckle. "I trust the contract's ready," she said. Jed handed her the document. She signed without hesitation. He signed after her. No vows, no preacher. Just ink and dust and 2 names on paper. "Married, then," he said. "Looks that way," she replied. Later that evening, as the sun bled orange into the horizon, Jed stood on the porch sipping black coffee. Inside, Eleanor moved with quiet confidence, unpacking her things and taking over the small guest bedroom without a word. She hadn't removed the veil, not even once. Ree came out, scratching his stubble. "You see her yet?" "Seen enough. Word around town is she ain't exactly a looker." "Word around town don't mean squat." "You curious?" Jed said nothing. Ree grinned. "Bet she's hiding a second head under there. Reckon that'd make conversation more interesting." When Ree laughed and walked off, Jed didn't join in. Something about Eleanor felt off, not in the way Ree assumed, not ugly or strange, but controlled. Like a coiled spring. Like someone who knew how to hide. That night, Jed passed by her room. A lantern flickered inside, her silhouette moving across the thin curtain, deliberate and graceful. She paused, as if sensing him watching. He knocked once. "Something wrong?" she asked through the door. "No," he said, hesitating. "Just figured we ought to talk, being married and all." The door creaked open. She stood there, veil still in place. The lantern cast an amber halo around her head, but her face remained in shadow. She didn't smile. "What is it you want to say, Mr. McGray?" Jed cleared his throat. "People been talking. About why you wear that veil." "I'm sure they have. They say things. I ain't inclined to believe them." "Then don't." He leaned on the doorframe. "Are you ashamed of something?" "No," she said. "But I've learned that men don't always react well to seeing what's real." Jed frowned. "You think I scare easy?" "No," she said softly now. "I think you judge quick." Her hand lifted to the edge of the veil, then stopped. "If you're looking for beauty," she said, "you won't find it on my face. Better decide now if you want to back out." He didn't flinch. "I ain't afraid of monsters, Miss Eleanor." She paused, her lips barely visible through the mesh. "I'm not a monster. But I've met them." Slowly, deliberately, she lifted the veil. Jed's breath caught. She wasn't ugly, not even close. Her features were sharp, high cheekbones carved like canyon rock, full lips, storm gray eyes that seemed to pierce through the walls around his thoughts. But her face told stories. An old scar across her jawline, faded but angry. Another along the edge of her temple. Not flaws. Proof. He stared, not in shock, but in silence. "I didn't lie," she said. "I'm not what men expect. I've had to make sure of it." Jed didn't speak for a long moment. Then he said, "Pretty doesn't matter to me." Her brow lifted. "But you," he continued, "you look like you survived a war." "I did." They stood in silence, the wind pressing against the walls outside like a whisper of things to come. He stepped back from the door. "You're welcome here, Eleanor. Long as you want to be." She nodded once. He turned, walked down the hall, and just before reaching his room, he heard her voice drift after him, quiet but laced with something heavy. "Good night, Jedediah." He didn't sleep well. Not because of fear or doubt, but because he just realized the land might not be the wildest thing he'd ever tried to tame. And maybe, just maybe, he was the one in danger. The morning came with the scent of creosote and ash drifting on the wind, promising another dry, unforgiving day. Jedediah rose before the sun as he always did, but this time he paused outside the guest room, listening to the faint shuffle of Eleanor moving inside. She was already awake. He wasn't surprised. At breakfast, she joined the table with her sleeves rolled up and hair tied back, eyes sharp and clear. No veil, no curtain. The hands went quiet when she walked in, eggs halfway to their mouths, coffee cups paused mid-air. She met their stares with absolute stillness. Jed cleared his throat. "This here's my wife, Eleanor. She's running the books now and overseeing the kitchen. Any man here got an issue with that can come see me." The men nodded, some slower than others, and resumed eating. Ree muttered something under his breath but didn't push it. Eleanor sat down without comment, spooned up her eggs, and asked if anyone had checked the fence line west of the ridge. No one answered, but Jed smiled faintly. She wasn't asking for approval, she was taking the reins. Over the next few days, Eleanor wove herself into ranch life with an unsettling ease. She mucked stalls with the new boys, walked the fence line with Jed, and corrected his ledgers with ruthless efficiency. Her penmanship was elegant and precise, like someone who once had formal schooling and then forgot how to care about showing it off. But it was her eyes that kept him on edge. Not because they were beautiful, though they were, but because they missed nothing. She watched the ranch like a hawk circling overhead, calculating, measuring, waiting. And then there were the scars. Jed noticed them in fragments, a thin line just below her ear, a jagged mark across her ribs when the wind blew her shirt against her skin. He didn't ask, not yet. But they haunted him like the echo of a story half heard. One afternoon, they found themselves alone in the barn, mending a busted wheel axle. Her fingers were covered in grease, her brow damp with sweat. "You ever been to war?" she asked, sudden and quiet. He nodded once. "Served under Colonel Whitmore. Gettysburg, mostly. My brother died in the Shenandoah. I'm sorry." He gave a shrug, but something in him tightened. "Was a long time ago." She looked up, eyes unreadable. "War's never just about time. It leaves things behind." That night, he sat on the porch while she played a tune on a harmonica she'd found in the bottom of an old trunk. The sound was raw, lonely, full of something that felt like memory. He said nothing, just watched her, wondering how many versions of Eleanor Albright had existed before the one he married. Then came the day she shot the rattlesnake. Jed had been halfway to the corral when he heard the gunshot crack through the still air. By the time he reached the outhouse, Eleanor was standing with her revolver drawn, the snakes had a mangled mess in the dirt. She looked over her shoulder and smirked. "Guess that's one snake that won't bite your behind." He blinked, then laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. The sound surprised even him. "You're full of surprises, woman. You've seen about 3%. He believed it. But surprises turned to questions when Jed stumbled upon the letters. He'd been searching the office for an old land deed when he found them, tucked inside the pages of a ledger, folded, worn, and tied together with a red ribbon. The top one was signed with a single letter, J. He wasn't proud of reading them, but he read every word. They weren't love letters, not exactly. They were warnings, threats disguised as affection, promises of a reunion Eleanor clearly wanted no part of. Words like belong and debt were scratched across the paper like barbed wire. The next morning, he waited for her at the edge of the paddock. "You got something you want to tell me?" he asked, holding the stack in one hand. Her eyes dropped to the ribbon. She didn't flinch. I didn't write those, she said. I kept them. To remember. Remember what? She took a long breath. That I was property once. Jed's grip tightened on the letters. Who is J? Jonas Rigg. Bounty hunter, trafficker, a snake in a hat. He bought me when I was 17. A cold fury slid through Jed's chest. Bought? She nodded. In New Orleans. My uncle owed a debt he couldn't pay. Sold me like a mule. Took me 2 years to escape. And now he's looking for you. Her eyes met his, steady and unafraid. He always was. Jed didn't ask more. He didn't need to. The letters told him enough. Eleanor hadn't just survived something, she'd escaped someone who still believed he owned her. That night, a stranger rode through Bent Willow, asking questions. Ree caught wind of it at the saloon and came back with the word. Fella in a long coat, tall, scar on his cheek. Said he was looking for a woman named Eliza. Jed's heart hitched. Eliza? Yeah. Said she might be traveling under a false name. Jed didn't go home right away. He sat at the edge of the dry creek bed, staring at the stars until the sky turned bruised purple. When he did return, Eleanor was standing in the yard, rifle slung across her back, her hair whipped in the wind, loose and dark like the night around her. He's here, she said. Jed swallowed. You know for sure? She nodded. I know the way a wolf circles. He doesn't want to kill me. Not yet. He wants to break me again. Jed looked at her, really looked, and understood then that his feelings weren't born of pity or curiosity. Somewhere between the silence and the grit and the ghost notes of her harmonica, he'd fallen for her. You ain't alone, he said. Not anymore. She looked at him like she didn't quite believe it. Or maybe she couldn't afford to. Before either of them could say more, a shot rang out in the distance. Jed ducked. Eleanor was already moving, rifle in hand, eyes scanning the dark. Another shot, closer. The ranch erupted into chaos. Cattle stirred, dogs howled. One of the hands yelled, "Riders on the ridge." Jed ran for the barn. Eleanor was already scaling the ladder to the lookout point. She shouted, "We're under attack." Gunfire cracked again, this time slamming into the side of the chicken coop. A lantern shattered, and flames kissed the hay. Ree barreled out of the bunkhouse with a shotgun. Jed fired into the night, shouting orders, smoke burning his eyes. Then came the lull, 30 seconds of pure silence broken only by the distant thunder of retreating hoofbeats. Jed ran to Eleanor. Her face was streaked with ash and sweat, but her hands didn't shake. They were testing the perimeter, she said. He's not coming alone. Jed stared into the night, heart hammering. We need to leave, she added. No. We fight. She turned to him, and in her eyes was something equal parts defiance and fear. You don't know what he's capable of. Jed stepped closer. I know what you are. That quieted her. A coyote howled in the distance. The fire in the coop crackled, casting shadows that danced like spirits. Eleanor looked down at the rifle in her hands. Then she met his eyes again. I was never meant to stay anywhere, she said. But I'm tired of running. Jed nodded. Then we make our stand. She offered him a half-smile, worn, cracked, and real. I hope you shoot better than you flirt. He grinned back. I've had more practice. They stood side by side in the dark, smoke curling around them, the scent of blood and fire in the air. Somewhere out there, Jonas Rigg was watching, waiting. But so were they. The morning after the attack arrived colder than it had any right to be, the air heavy with smoke and tension. The fire had been doused, the damage minimal, but the silence that hung over Bent Willow Ranch wasn't the kind that promised peace. It was the kind that pressed on your chest and whispered in your ear, he's not done yet. Jedediah stood in the yard, shotgun across his chest, boots planted in the blood-streaked dust. The carcass of a cow lay by the gate, throat slit, eyes wide open, a message, plain as daylight. Ree knelt beside it. They didn't even take the meat. They didn't come to steal, Jed muttered. They came to scare. Well, Ree spat in the dirt, I'd say it worked. Half the hands are talking about leaving. Don't want to get caught in a war over a woman they barely know. Jed turned sharply. That woman's my wife. Ree raised both palms. Ain't me you need to convince. Inside the house, Eleanor packed a saddlebag, methodical and cold-eyed. She moved with a purpose Jed recognized too well, like a soldier dressing for battle. No hesitation, no wasted motion. You planning to ride out? He asked from the doorway. She didn't look up. He'll come again. With more men. If I'm gone, you've got a chance. No, Jed said, stepping in. That's not how we do this. You think this is noble? She snapped. It's suicide. I've faced worse than some bounty hunter. She stared at him, jaw clenched. This isn't about pride. He doesn't just kill, Jed. He undoes people. He'll twist your men against you, make you doubt your own gut. That's how he wins. Jed came closer, his voice low. Then let him try. Let him ride in here with the devil on his shoulder. I'd rather bleed beside you than watch your back disappear into the dust. That silenced her. Outside, Ree shouted. Jed and Eleanor bolted out the door. A riderless horse galloped in from the south, one of theirs, Gus's Palomino. Its flank was lathered in sweat, reins dangling, a crimson streak along its neck. Jed grabbed the reins and calmed it. He's in trouble. They tracked him by noon, blood on the rocks, boot prints that led through Red Gulch. Buzzards circled high overhead. When they found Gus, he was still breathing but barely. He'd been beaten near to death, left for the vultures. Jed knelt by his side, pressing cloth to the wound. Who did this? Gus coughed blood, eyes rolling. Man in a duster, black gloves. Said her name like a hymn. Jed swallowed hard. Jonas. Gus nodded. He said she owed him more than blood. Jed felt Eleanor stiffen behind him. They got Gus back to the ranch. The doc from town did what he could, but the damage was done. Gus wouldn't ride again, and Jonas Rigg had made his intentions clear. That night, Eleanor stood outside the bunkhouse, watching the stars. Jed joined her, the silence stretching between them like wire. I should have killed him when I had the chance, she whispered. You had the chance. She nodded slowly. After I escaped. A year later, I tracked him to a mining camp in Arizona. He was drunk, alone. I had a gun to his back for 20 seconds. Jed looked at her. What stopped you? I wanted him to know. To live with the fact he couldn't break me. Now he wants to finish the job. She didn't reply. Jed reached for her hand. She let him take it. We ride at dawn, he said. You, me, Ree, and whoever's got enough backbone left. We take the fight to him. Her grip tightened. I know where he'll be. Jonas Rigg didn't just ride into places, he infected them. Eleanor had learned to track him by scent, by the way towns bent around his presence like wind-warped trees. She named a place 2 valleys west, Crooked Tree, a dying mining outpost turned outlaw haven. They left before the sun broke, 6 riders, Jed, Eleanor, Ree, and 3 men stubborn or stupid enough to come along. They moved like ghosts, rifles strapped tight, nerves tighter. Crooked Tree rose from the desert like a scar, boarded windows, rusted signs, 1 saloon, 2 brothels, and a graveyard just as big. The streets were quiet. Too quiet. Eleanor pulled her hat low. He's watching. Always watches first. Jed glanced at Ree. Keep the men close. Don't draw unless you see him. They dismounted and stepped inside the saloon. The air stank of whiskey and sweat. A piano played out of tune, and men looked up from their drinks with slow, appraising eyes. Behind the bar stood a woman with a shotgun and no patience. You looking for trouble? She asked, her voice rough as sandpaper. We're looking for Jonas Rigg, Eleanor said. The saloon went still. The bartender's lip curled. Plenty of folks look for him. Most end up dead or wishing they were. Jed stepped forward. We ain't most. The doors behind them creaked open. Boots on wood. Jed turned, hand already near his holster. Jonas Rigg stood in the doorway like a man stepping into his own parlor. He wore a black duster, hat tilted low, the scar slashing his cheek like a crooked grin. His eyes locked on Eleanor and lit with something vile, reverent, and cruel. Well now, he drawled. If it ain't my runaway Rose. Jed stepped between them. She ain't yours. Jonas chuckled. She's whatever she chooses to be, I suppose. But she left me with an itch I've been needing to scratch. Eleanor's voice was ice. The only thing you're getting is a bullet. Ree dove sideways. Jed fired. Chaos exploded. Jonas rolled behind a table as his men burst through windows and doors, at least 8 of them. The saloon turned into a thunderstorm of gunpowder and screams. Jed ducked behind the bar, glass shattering overhead. He fired once, twice, dropping a man trying to flank Ree. Eleanor had disappeared. For a moment, Jed panicked, until he spotted her silhouette upstairs, above the rafters. She moved like a shadow, silent and sure, rifle aimed. She fired. Jonas's second-in-command dropped like a stone. Jonas snarled, eyes searching for her. You're still mine, Eliza, he shouted. She stepped forward from the upper balcony. Not anymore. Her shot hit his shoulder. He staggered back, teeth bared. Jed rushed him. The two collided near the swinging doors, crashing into the street. They fought in the dust, fists and blood and rage. Jonas grabbed a knife. Jed caught his wrist, twisted. The blade dropped. Then Eleanor was there, rifle trained, voice steady. Do it. Jonas growled, spitting blood. Finish it. She hesitated. Jed coughed, his face bloody. Don't give him another second. Jonas laughed, his eyes wild. You won't. That's the joke. You never could. Eleanor stepped forward. You're right. She swung the rifle like a club. The butt cracked against his skull. He went limp. Breathing hard, she knelt beside him, pressing the barrel to his temple. Jed watched, not stopping her, not this time. But she didn't pull the trigger. I want you to live with this, she whispered. To know I beat you. She stood. Jed stared at her, heart pounding. You're letting him go? He asked. No, she said, stepping back. I just didn't kill him. Behind them, Rhea limped out of the saloon. Is it over? Jed looked at Eleanor. Not yet, she said. But we're close. They left Jonas bleeding in the street. The law would come eventually, or the desert would take him. Either way, he'd never chase her again. On the ride home, Eleanor rode beside Jed, hat tilted low, rifle strapped to her back. He glanced over. You did what you had to. She looked forward. I did what I could live with. They rode in silence, the trail winding like a scar through the dust. But ahead, the sky was clear, and the wind carried no smoke. The fire that consumed Bent Willow Ranch was born in a night as dark as any storm could summon. The moon hung high, a pale witness to the violence that boiled in the blood of men who had never been taught how to leave things behind. For 3 weeks, they had rested, no longer on the offensive but waiting, watching, the calm stretched long and taut, ready to break. Jedediah stood at the edge of the creek, staring into the rippling water. He hadn't seen his wife since dawn. She'd gone off toward the ridge, tracking something. He didn't ask. It wasn't like Eleanor to disappear without a word, but he knew better than to question her, not when she wore that look in her eyes, determined, unreadable, like a storm she couldn't outrun. It wasn't until the shout came that he knew the storm was already here. Fire! Rhea's voice echoed through the night air, frantic. Jed spun toward the sound, heart pounding. He ran, fast as he could, toward the barn, toward the smoke curling up into the sky, thick and black. The ranch was already ablaze. The wind howled through the dry grasses, feeding the flames, their orange tongues licking at the horizon. Eleanor was standing at the barn's entrance, eyes fierce, her rifle in her hand. They're here, she said, her voice low and calm despite the inferno. Jonas sent them. Jed didn't need to ask who. He'd been waiting for this moment, for the enemy to show themselves one final time. But there was something else in her eyes, something wild that hadn't been there before. Where are the others? He asked. Out there, she said, pointing toward the far side of the property where shadows moved. But we can't fight this fire. Not with what we have. Jed cursed under his breath. We're not running. No, she agreed, meeting his gaze. We're fighting. They fought the fire like soldiers, but it was clear the ranch wasn't going to make it. The flames consumed everything, barns, fences, haystacks, until there was nothing left but charred earth. By the time the first of Jonas Riggs' men appeared, they had already lost the battle with the fire, but the real battle was only beginning. Jed and Eleanor stood side by side, rifles raised. The air was thick with smoke, their lungs burning. A shot rang out, and another. Ree went down first, his leg buckling. "Get to cover," he shouted, his voice strained with pain. Eleanor was already moving, crouching low behind a stack of timber. "I'll hold them off," she called to Jed. "Get the others." Jed moved to help Ree, pulling him toward what was left of the barn. Behind them, Eleanor fired again, the sharp crack of her rifle cutting through the roar of the fire. The first man came charging through the smoke. Jed raised his rifle, but before he could pull the trigger, a bullet slammed into his chest, knocking him off his feet. He hit the ground hard, the wind knocked out of him, blood seeping from the wound. He scrambled behind a pile of crates, struggling to catch his breath. He fired. A flash of light, another man dropped. But the others kept coming. Then, from the corner of his eye, he saw her. Eleanor. Her silhouette cut through the smoke, her movements a blur of power and precision. She was no longer hiding. She was the storm. Her shot rang out, and another man fell. She didn't stop, her eyes sharp, tracking every movement. Her rage, her grief, it all came pouring out in a fury of gunfire. Jed pulled himself to his feet, gritting his teeth against the pain. Another gunshot rang out, and Jonas Rigg appeared, stepping into the firelight like a man made of shadows. He stood tall, dark eyes glinting with cold malice. Eleanor didn't flinch. She met his gaze head-on, rifle aimed, steady. "You," Jonas spat. "I knew you'd come crawling back. You're still mine." Eleanor's lips curled into a cold, dangerous smile. "I'm not yours, Jonas. And I never will be." Jonas laughed, drawing his pistol. "You should have stayed gone. You should have stayed dead." The fight exploded. Jonas's gunfire cut through the air, but Eleanor was faster. She shot first, the bullet tearing through his arm. He stumbled, his pistol dropping. She was already there, moving in close, and without a word, she kicked his gun away, her eyes never leaving his face. Jonas Rigg was no longer the hunter. He was the hunted. "You lost," Eleanor said softly, her voice steady, but the fire in her eyes told a different story. "You lost everything." And with that, she raised her rifle one last time. She steadied her breath. The shot rang out. Jonas Rigg crumpled to the ground, his body falling like a broken puppet. Silence. The flames crackled, the last embers of the fire flickering in the night. Jed watched her, his heart pounding. She turned to him, her face streaked with soot, her expression unreadable. "We won," she whispered. And for the first time, Jed realized it wasn't just the ranch that had burned. It was everything they had been through, every wound, every loss, every bit of darkness that had once kept them apart. And now, with Jonas Rigg lying dead in the dirt, it was finally over. They stood there, side by side, in the aftermath of a battle they had never thought they would win. But they had. The fire had burned itself out. There was nothing left to fear and nothing left to run from.